What's going on, everybody? Welcome into The Highlight, a business podcast for business people, and we're serious. We're so serious today. I've brought on the most serious business person I know. No, he's not that serious. He's a good guy. Today, I'm joined by my good friend, Stephen Capps. Stephen is a crazy entrepreneur, been in business for a long time, and now he's got his own podcast for the last couple of years teaching business owners. I love the guy. I love his content. I love what he does. Stephen, welcome to the show. I don't want to steal your thunder. Why don't you take a second and explain to everybody who you are and what you do? Because I could talk about you all day.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here for sure. Well, I started in the business probably in elementary school, drawing pictures for friends for $1. That was like my first business. But I've always been entrepreneurial, always a go-getter. And so in 2001, I get married, and then my wife Lisa worked with her dad in his still business. And about a year after we were married, I went to work for him as well. Then he ends up giving us the business, which is like, oh my goodness, this is incredible. Well, what it actually meant was that we got a forklift, a welding machine, and a business that didn't make any money. So it wasn't that glamorous, but that did not faze us. It was a game on. We are going to figure this out. And so I had 100 different harebrained ideas, and one of my ideas that actually worked was to build and install custom driveway gates. And it was just, one of thousands of ideas, and this one just happened to work. So we had that moment of, wow, we can actually pay ourselves. So it was like, the top of the world feeling, And so things started to click in the business, and it was about that time that Elisa went in for what we felt like was a routine surgery, and the doctor comes out and says that your wife has stage 3 ovarian cancer. So not what you expect to hear when you're in your early 30s. Yeah. And so about the time I'm 34, I had lost my wife to cancer, lost our largest customer. I got remarried and then suffered near financial ruin before I was 34. So a bump in the road there.
Very small.
But yeah. But I have always been that guy that, hey, I'm going to figure this out. How do we get over this? And we were talking earlier before we came on about, how hard a business is. And I just thought that I was doing everything wrong. That was what I thought, which I did a lot of stuff wrong, and which, I always say that I made more mistakes than most. One mistake was I didn't pay payroll taxes for 2 years. Well, I didn't know that you were supposed to. And so now, today, we have a debt-free, a 7-figure business. We have that same fabrication business is now a seven-figure debt-free business. We also have a handyman business, and then I have a podcast called Pull Up and Thrive, where I help overwhelm business owners overcome adversity so they can avoid the crash and burn and have the life and business that they want. So that's me in a nutshell, and I'm married to an amazing woman, Sarah. We've been married 15 years, and we have 5.5-year-old twin girls. So life could not be better, for sure. Well, and I'm here on the podcast,
the biggest podcast of all time.
People
obviously.
Yes.
It's a nice thing to you to say, and that's how I know we're good friends. That you're going to throw your guy a bone. I appreciate that. But I love. I do love you as a person, and I love your story, but I think one of the things you're really good at is really leaning into the hard stuff. And it's almost like you really needed to learn the personal lesson of how to deal with hard stuff, because I don't know if I know a lot of people who have dealt with more hardship than you. And I think being an entrepreneur or a small business owner is a incredibly difficult proposition. It's a
Yeah.
hard adventure to take.
Yeah.
It really is. And it can be isolating and all the things. And so how do you have you always been good at facing adversity and going towards the hard thing, or is that something that just sort of got beat into you 20 years ago?
Well, um, I think that one thing that we miss a lot in both business and just our culture in general is that grit. Just that, stick to itiveness. I'm going to do this no matter what. And, I think that is just making a decision. This is what we're doing. This is where we're going. And I will not be denied. Now, for me, I've always had hardship and difficulty my entire life. We moved all the time. By the time I graduated high school, we had moved more than 20 times. I had a very pronounced stutter. So I'm always the new kid and I stutter. And with that, I was always had tricks and techniques that I would use to try to not stutter. So you do that for your whole life, which what that was a problem solving every day, all the time. I'm going to figure this out. How did I say my name? How did I say this sentence? And what we want is that we want it to be easy. We never, well, now as a dad, I do not want my girls to ever suffer pain. I don't want them hurt. I don't want them injured. But those are the very things that make us strong. It's like, why is the greatest generation called the greatest generation? Well, they went through the Great Depression. They went through World War II. And that was like, 16 years or, something like that. It was an extended period of time. I may be wrong on the length of time, but it was an extended period of time to where they had to lean in, because if you don't lean in, which is not natural, it is not natural to lean into a hardship or difficulty. The first thing that you want to do is run away, hide, stick your head in the sand. I don't want to deal with it, which is what happened to me after Lisa passed away. Just imagine this. You have a baby business that is just getting off the ground and you're like, man, we are going to make it. And then your wife dies and you lose your largest customer. And I had a secretary that was helping me, and I gave her all my paperwork. I don't want to deal with it. I can't take it right now. And I sort of felt like, well, I have good enough reasons why that we can't pay our bills, that we can't pay our taxes. I have a good enough reason and people will understand and it won't be a big deal. It was the total opposite. Because at the end of the day, your vendors want their money. They're not mad. They're not mean people. And at the end of the day, the IRS, they will get their money one way or another. So I realized, all right, even though I have the best excuse ever, it's not going to cut it in the real world. And so I have this saying, no excuses. Because at the end of the day, no matter how good the excuse is, it sounds a lot like my dog ate my homework. And it's, I think the reason why folks are entrepreneurs is that they're problem solvers and they get the job done. And if you're making excuses all the time, you're not going to get the job done.
Well, you get dealt the cards you get dealt. There's no, it can be a bad hand. Depending on the day, you could get a bad hand, you could get a good hand. I mean, that is truly what it's like to be a human. And it's especially what it's like to be an entrepreneur, because the stakes get raised so much, because now you have employees that are on the line, because, you had back then you had a assistant she depended on you for her livelihood. And it even though you were dealt a terrible hand, and everybody would understand that, hey, maybe he doesn't want to really deal with this stuff and like he needs to do all these things, like you still had to lean into it because otherwise more people were going to be hurt. So there's this level of like, if you avoid the pain, it gets worse. Like there's an amplification effect every day, every hour that you don't deal with it. It just gets worse and worse and worse. And I will tell you that if my wife was here, she would also tell you, this is still something I struggle with. I don't have this figured out at all. It is a big time list item for me to improve in 2023 and beyond. It's like something I'm really trying to work on, because my move is usually like, I either avoid it or I'll just like, the most productive thing I'll do is like what you said, like I'll just delegate it out to somebody else, when really it should be me that gets in there and like, and handles it. And I don't know where that comes from, and probably need to do some deep thinking on it. And I think that might be my New Year goal, but, you know, you still have to be able to lean in and do the hard things. And what's hard for you may not be hard for somebody else, right? Like what,
Right. But what I have learned through all of this is that we all face pressure. It's all different. You know, what is a pressure for one may not be anything for, someone else. And we all face pressure. And, human nature is to avoid that pressure. But there's a video on YouTube about that shows a butterfly emerging from a cocoon, and it is the pressure and the struggle from that actually gives that butterfly strength to live outside of the cocoon. And then in the video, someone helps the butterfly out because they don't want it to suffer. Well, because it didn't suffer, it had not developed the muscles to survive in life. And whenever we can lean into that pressure, which is not easy at all, but we have to make a decision. All right, I'm going to deal with this. All right. In order to deal with this, I'm going to need help. Okay. I need someone to hold me accountable. And because if we can lean in to the hard things, it will work something in us that we cannot get any other way. You cannot get it through, listening to a podcast or a book or, a conference, all those.
And those things can feel good. They can feel like you're doing something.
Yeah, absolutely. Those things are all super and great, and I'm all about that. But whenever you lean into the hard things, and there's a scripture that says, these light afflictions are working an eternal weight of glory. So we start a business and we're all rah, rah, rah. Oh my goodness, I just left my job. This has been my dream for my whole life, and it's unbelievable. And which is awesome. We need to celebrate. But the reality of the hardship and the difficulty of business is unbelievable because people don't see that side.
Well, I think what's interesting about hardship stuff is that it's really if you think about the psychology behind it, your brain doesn't have a pathway to solve that problem yet. And so you're going to have to use a lot of brain calories and a lot of energy to go figure out an actual pathway to create a repeatable process that can solve that thing over and over and over and over again. And a lot of times, we will avoid those things to go do the thing we already know how to do. Right. And that's because it's easier.
Right.
And I already know how to do, let's say, in my position where I'm at with our company, I know how to post things on Facebook and Instagram, right? I know how to go out and clip that content. I have that plan and pathway already built into my head. It takes me no time. And just recently, we hired a person to help us do all that stuff. And so now we have all of our clients are no longer 100% reliant on me to get their social media content out. It's now also on her to come in and help and all that stuff. I avoided hiring that person for probably 3 months too long because I didn't want to have to figure out how to delegate everything to her, how to train everything on her. It was just easier to die by a death of 1,000 cuts every day and ultimately slow the business down from growing and keeping me from going and doing the thing that I should be doing. And now she's crushing it, and she's been with us maybe a month, and it was definitely painful in the beginning for me, not from anything she did, but from my end, because I was like, I was having to go in and like, all right, well, what do I actually do? And then put it down on paper and then like justify it. And like, you have to sort of look at some of the bad things you do, and you have to like look in the mirror and be like, where are you a failure? And like, how is she going to improve? And, and it's a pain in the butt. But on the other side of it, and I'd love to know what you think about this, it was worth it. And I don't know of a time I've ever faced something hard and win, lose, or draw on the other side of it, not been happy that I did it. There's infinite number of times that I have not done the hard thing and been like, bleep, I feel terrible about not doing the hard thing.
Right. And it's the act of doing something to get us to where it'll be easy. It is that act in between. It is that span, that gulf in between, because I started this business. I know how to do it. I know how to do it right, and I'm the only one in the world that can do this, which is ridiculous why we think that. But if we could realize that delegation is not 2 plus 2. It's not even 5 plus 5. It's 5 times 5, or 10 times 10. So being able to delegate something, delegation is multiplication. And so it takes time, it takes pain in order to delegate something. But once that we can get that off of our plate, the entrepreneur can do the things that only they can do.
What's interesting about delegation is that you're going to give something to somebody. They're going to pretty quickly match what you did with it. And then they're going to apply their own unique skills, passions, and proficiencies on top of it. And that's where the multiplication effect you're talking about comes in, is that all of a sudden they're like, oh, I can push this to a whole new level that you were getting in the way of. And now the business is even larger than it was beforehand. We had Angie Moss on the show. She's a sales coach for Southwestern a few weeks back. And she talked about how when you delegate, there's sort of an expectation that it's going to take 30 times the amount of time it takes you to do the task to delegate it to that person. So her example was, if you had a 5-minute task, that's going to take you, I can't do math, but however many hours that ends up being, like 5 minutes times 30, 150 minutes. So that's like what, 2.5 hours. Mm-hmm. And we will avoid 2.5 hours of work just to do 5 minutes of work 200 days in a row, which is crazy. But maybe this is not teaching anybody anything new here, but it's a warning for everybody to say, hey, if you're doing this, get rid of it. Like, do you have a tool or a process you do through your day where you go, these are tasks I should be delegating, and this is stuff I want to keep on my plate? Or are you doing that stuff as like a quarterly thing, a monthly thing?
I just write stuff down. And I was reading, I think it was Good to Great, where Jim Collins says that your do not do list is more important than your to-do list. So if something that comes up, I'll write it down, where the businesses are now, I've about delegated everything off my plate that I possibly can. And so now I'm starting over with the Steve Capps brand, Steve Capps business, where, hey, I'm doing everything right now because it's those, baby stages.
Well, I know it won't take you 20 years to figure this one out, but I would love to hear.
Well, I hope not.
Well, as your friend, I'm not going to let you do that. I'm going to hold you accountable as we go through this.
Yes.
So talk to us about the Steve Capps brand, and like, what are you trying to do there? Like with Pull Up and Thrive, and we see you on the YouTube channel with the Servant Warrior shirt, and I know a lot about it obviously, but I'd love you to, like, where's your heart at with this? Like, why is this the next step? You have a successful business, you're profitable, you're over 7 figures, you've delegated it out, you have hit the entrepreneurial dream, and here you are running into hard stuff again. Why?
Because I don't know. Entrepreneurs are crazy. They cannot be understood. Yeah. Yeah. Why would you leave a perfectly good job to go and start a business? Well, it's a sort of that same scenario here. But, I just love helping people. On the Enneagram, I am a performer helper. And I am always the guy that I want to help. And so I've always had a dream, even as a little kid, of being a motivational speaker, but honestly, I didn't even realize that that was a real thing up until probably, I don't know, 5 years ago or so. Which, yes, it's a thing, but it's like, oh, there are people that's all that they do, is that they go and speak and they get paid, and they don't just jump up on stage and wing something. They write it, they rehearse it, they
craft,
pitch it, they sell it. Yeah. And so I started pursuing the speaking business right before the pandemic. And so I was spending about every day just writing. Then the pandemic happened, so I had to focus on my real business. And then everything blew up in a good way. 2020 was our best year ever. So I get sucked back into business. And then I'm not doing anything related to the speaking business for like 6 months. So I lost all of my momentum. So I was super discouraged. And oh man, what am I going to do now? So I started a podcast because I don't have to go anywhere. I don't have to rely on anyone. So I started that podcast, and it's sort of a twofold for me. One, I have to speak. Two, I have to create content. And so I set up a system for myself that'll hold me accountable, because I know if I was like, well, I'll just put out a podcast whenever I am inspired or whatever.
Feel like it.
Well, then that, yeah. Well, then it never happens. So you have to create a system for yourself that, all right, every other week I have to upload a show, and there's people waiting for that to happen. And then I have a level of I have a certain level of quality that I want to try to put out. And so I produce the best that I can at the stage that I'm at now. And so I've been doing the podcast for about 2 years. And then I was always wearing a shirt or a hat that, had some type of a, saying on it that spoke to me. And then I was like, well, why don't I put my sayings or my statements on these shirts, rather than always wearing, someone else's stuff. And so I have the servant, a warrior thing, which is if the moment that you decide to be in business, the number one reason that you should be having a business is that you serve. And then when people hear that serve, I ain't nobody's servant. Well, if you cannot serve, you should not be in business, because whenever your phone rings or you get a email, people are calling or emailing you because they have a problem, and they are looking for someone to serve you. And then, like Rabbi Daniel Lappin says, that they want to give you certificates of appreciation. And so I added in the word warrior because the marketplace needs someone to fight for them. There are things in every industry that are just not right. And so your customers need someone to serve them, and they need someone to fight for them. Like all of our businesses are in the service industry, which you would think in the service industry people would serve their customers. They do not. Folks don't answer the phone. They don't call back. They don't give quotes. They don't show up. It is unbelievable. if you're in business and you can show up, I mean, you are beyond like 75% of your competition. And especially in the construction space, it is like the construction code. We do not show up and we do not call people back, and we refuse to give people quotes. That is like a code, I guess. But we started a handyman business in 2021, and I mean, it just blew up because we showed up. And we'll give people on the spot pricing, and we'll do the job right then. And so there are customers waiting for you. There are customers that are wanting to be served, and they want someone to fight for them. Fight for what is right in the marketplace. Fight what is right to do by that customer. So I say, when in doubt, serve, 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 serve,
Yeah, I
serve.
don't think I've ever felt bad serving somebody. You always feel good on the other side of that. Like back to our early point about I never feel bad about doing something hard. I've never felt bad about putting somebody else's needs in front of my own, especially if it's a healthy, beneficial relationship. There's definitely times where people in your life or customers even can take advantage of you, for sure. And there's some nuance to that as a leader of an organization where you got to know, like, is this person taking advantage of us, or is there an actual issue that we've messed up and we're going to actually be the one to serve them even more so now. But that's just part of it. And part of the game is knowing when you're being taken advantage of or not. I think it was, I think there's a story with Herb Kelleher. I don't know if you've heard this before. I know we read a lot of the same books, so I can't remember where this came from, but basically the Southwest Airlines department, customer service department, had been having this issue with this woman over and over, and just flight after flight after flight. She always had problems and always left negative feedback and always said negative things. And Southwest takes it so seriously. Eventually it got up to Herb Kelleher's desk, and he takes a minute, looks at the situation, gets all the information he needs, and then he gets out his stationery and writes a little note and mails it back to the woman. And the note simply said, "We'll miss you as a customer." And even that example, he's letting her go as a customer. I look at that and I go, they did a lot before they got to that moment. It wasn't the first time and he just fired her as a customer. They tried again and again and again and again. And all the different channels in that bigger organization were trying to fix it. And it just never, they just could do nothing to actually make it right for her. And at the end, they ended up serving her well, I think, by letting her go choose another airline, because she was obviously unhappy. So she needed to make a choice to either accept the way they do business or move on to the next one. Right. And that's still serving her and trying to get her in the right position. So I love that. My question, my next question is, I know you work with a lot of entrepreneurs and like you're friends with a lot of entrepreneurs. You've been doing this a long time. Like, what's the number one issue you see come up with entrepreneurs / small business owners again and again and again?
Two really big things. One is a delegation. Well, actually, three things. Okay, three things. Delegation. They hire the wrong people constantly. It is like they hire for skill. Okay, I need a carpenter. I need a web guy. I need a marketing XYZ. And they hire based on skill rather than culture fit. So they don't delegate. They hire the wrong people. And then part of that there is that they hire the wrong people. And then the wrong person messes everything up, and they blame the person. And then, people ask, I need help in my business. And I'm like, well, you need to find out who the crazy person is hiring all of these people and let them go. And so delegation, hiring the wrong people. Yeah, right, exactly. And then a business owner or the founder or the manager, they're not running the business. They're allowing every crazy and toxic customer, employee, vendor, they allow everyone else to run the business. And if you can avoid those three things, I say that you can have the life and business that you want. But ultimately, if I'm failing, if my business is failing, it is my fault, because everything rises and falls at leadership. I mean, that is like leadership 101. The first day they say, hey, if your business has a problem, go look in the mirror, because you are the problem. But we're also a solution as well.
And there's some hope to that, where you're going, we may have gotten ourselves into this position, but on Monday morning I'm coming in and we're now doing things differently. And my education level has changed. My experience level has changed based on new information that I've gotten over the weekend or over the last couple of months. And the good news is that you're never too far gone.
A decision.
You can decide to change.
Right. Make a decision and change it.
I love that. So this is my favorite question to ask guests when they come on. We ask everybody the same sort of framing of this question, and it's around money. And I find it fascinating because you can always see what's on somebody's mind when you eliminate the money factor. Because so many times the reason we don't do things is because it costs. And fair enough, because cash flow is the thing that's constantly trying to knock us all out of business. So like, I get why people use cash as an excuse. To your point earlier about having a good reason, it's still a reason, and you've got to play the hand you're dealt.
Right.
So we're now taking cash off the table. I've 10x'd your budget, Stephen. What are you spending it on? It's a good question, isn't it?
That is a very good question. Hire someone that can manage me. And, I have seen entrepreneurs do this. They want to be the smartest person in the room. They want to have all the answers. They want to make all of the decisions. It is like, if I had, someone that was way smarter and wiser than me that could manage me, the possibilities would be endless, because I'm just so ADD and, squirrel and shiny things. And if I could hire someone to manage me.
I love there's this thing that it took me a long time to learn, especially with my first business. And I don't know if I actually learned it. I don't think I did. I don't think I learned this in my first business. I think it was after the fact, after I had crashed the thing because I hadn't learned one of these skills. And it's fallen in love with doing the day-to-day boring stuff. There's not really a new, fascinating, interesting thing that comes along that's going to really revolutionize the way we've done business for 10,000 years, right? It's just not going to come out. I mean, there's new technology and there's new things that'll make you more efficient, or their markets might change. But at the end of the day, we've been hiring the right people for the right seats since the beginning. We've been, financially responsible since the beginning. Those core tenets of business don't change. Market your business. Make sure people know who you are, know how to sell. Those tenets don't change, and they're not sexy and they're not interesting, especially once you've mastered them, quote unquote, because there's always more to master, but in your mind, you think you have. But just falling in love with the day-to-day pursuit of, I'm trying to think how to say this. There's a day-to-day pursuit of monotony. It's I'm just the person that's going to show up, hit the tree in the same spot, and at some point it will fall.
Right. It is the everyday, mundane, boring, not exciting, not glamorous. That is what is going to push your life and the business forward. I have a friend that lost over 75 pounds, and you ask him oh my goodness, Terry, you look amazing. What did you do? And I don't know, we're expecting some new diet fad or some new exercise machine that he bought off of late night TV. But he's I got up out of bed when nobody saw me, and I ran down the street, and I burned off more than I took in. So I say fill your life with the activities that nobody sees, and that will produce results that everybody sees.
I love that. Well, I appreciate you getting on here, man, and sharing your story and deep diving here. We could go for 3 hours. And so what I want to do is here in a couple months, maybe 6 months or so, we'll have you back on and we'll check back in and see how the new Stephen Capps brand is doing And I love it. We'll make sure to link up all your info in the show notes. So everybody that's out there, I will tell you, if you're a small business owner, if you're a leader and you're looking for somebody that can produce content and help you stay on the course and do the right things every day, and just be a coach that keeps you engaged and on track, Steve is a great guy to have in your corner. That is my ultimate endorsement. He's a good dude, and I've been fortunate to be friends with him for the last couple months. So this is great. Thank you for coming on the show. Anything else you want to get off your chest before we let you off the hook here?
Just nothing really, but StephenCaps.com. Pull Up and Thrive is the podcast. Go and check it out.
Great. We appreciate you guys listening. We will see you next week. Peace.